Sikandar Butshikan was probably the most destructive Islamic ruler in Kashmir. He forcefully converted most Kashmiri Hindus to Islam, and those who didn't, they were captured and they were slaughtered on Saturday. Saturday in Kashmir is called Batawar. Bata means Kashmiri Pandit. On Saturday, Batas would be killed at a place called Batamarun. That place is now called Batamalyun in Kashmir. It still exists in Kashmir, by the way. One of the most destructive things he did, he destroyed a sun temple at Martand. Then came the Afghans. Now you can imagine how brutal the Afghan rule must have been. Look at Afghanistan now. Yeah. Dogra rule actually started in 1846 and ended up till 1947 till India got independent. And during that period, Kashmiri Hindus saw a lot of prosperity. Okay. And they were all the functionaries of the government were Kashmiri Pandits, not because they were Kashmiri Pandits, but because they were educated class. During Afghan rule, a Kashmiri Pandit was taken to Kabul to help train people there how to calculate taxes in a fair manner.
Hello and welcome to OpenMind. Today we are going to be talking about a particular part of India which is called the paradise on earth. In fact, there's a Iranian saying, there is heaven on earth, it's here, it's here, it's here. And to talk about Kashmir, we have a Kashmiri Pandit, Mr. Ashok Moza, with us. He spent his childhood in Kashmir. He studied in Kashmir, really associated with Kashmir for longer than we can imagine. And he keeps abreast of all the developments in Kashmir. He has got great opinions. He's very learned about all that has happened in Kashmir, Kashmiri history, and we are going to be covering all of that today. Right now, he is in Houston. He's an industrialist and very successful, but he has not forgotten his roots. Mr. Moza, thank you for coming and welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure, Daddy. Thanks for inviting me. But before we get started, can we recite something from our scriptures? Absolutely. That's very unique to Kashmir.
Absolutely.
Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Dev Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Guruve Namaha.
So, this chant, I did not know. Does it originate in Kashmir?
Well, there is a version of it in Sharda. And I think that is the version that got finally translated into Sanskrit. Sharda as a language is very unique to Kashmir. As I was saying to somebody, what Pali is to Sanskrit, I would say Sharda has a simpler connection to Sanskrit. It is sort of a poor man's Sanskrit. And this was written in Sharda originally. And we always recite this wherever we go.
So, how common is Sharda today? Are there communities that still speak Sharda?
Well, Kashmiri Pandits made sure that Sharda doesn't disappear completely. But that was possible as long as we were in Kashmir. On a personal note, my mother was teaching at a school, they were called Sharda Peeths, and Sharda language was kept alive. After the Exodus, I don't know, there are still people who are trying to keep it alive. We have a script for it, which is there now. But it doesn't have the same institutional support as it used to have because there's no institution left. All Kashmiri Pandits are scattered all over the world, as a matter of fact, not just in India.
So there's no center of gravity here to support and take the language forward.
There is no government or state provided institutional support. There is happening at the individual level. I am trying to keep this language alive, but I can't have the same reach that probably a state-funded institution would have.
Makes sense. Is there a lot of literature that is written in Sharda if that would be lost if the vocabulary, if the language is not preserved?
Yes, there is fair amount of literature written in Sharda. My mother used to read and write it, and even I had uh, my hand at it, but I was struggling with Sanskrit as it is. There was no point in complicating life. It was necessary for a little kid growing up. So there is some literature still. A lot of our texts are still written in Sharda. And for instance, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. For instance, Rajatarangini was originally written in Sharda.
Which was but my next question. Wasn't Rice already written in Sharda? So I think
Yes, it was written in Sharda. And you see, the only written history of India came actually in Rajatarangini, written by Kalhan. And good thing was that Kalhan started the process back in, I think, 1100 something. Don't hold me to that. I'm not really sure of the date exact, but around that time. And then the tradition got continued. So a lot of other Kashmiris would write the events that were happening. There was a little lapse during Sikandar Butshikan's time, but the tradition was kept alive. So the Rajatarangini started in 1000 something, but it kept on being written till almost 17, 1800.
now that you talked about Kalhan and Rajatarangini, how did the Kashmir of the 11th and 12th century, which was the seat of Kashmiri Shaivism, writing texts like Rajatarangini, such rich texts that were written in that time, and really a leader in Sanskrit education and things like that. How did Kashmir of the 11th and 12th century end up in the Kashmir of today?
We'll have to go back to the history a little bit. Let's start with Kalhan, Rajatarangini time. About 1100s, Kashmir was thriving intellectual center. And at that time, that involved religious scriptures, mathematics, and literature. In that sense, Shivaism was already present at that time because Kalhan talks about Shivaism and he talks about it in old days, past times. So therefore, Shivaism was not discovered in 1100s. It was already there. And whole Kashmir was essentially an intellectual center for Hindus, especially the Shaivite philosophy, Advaita philosophy. And this was called the Shaivism at that time. It had three different legs, three different ways of looking at it. The first one was the religious component of it related to the Shakti. Shakti was identified with Kali, Mahakali. Then there was, of course, the Shiva himself. And the third component of it was related to yoga, Kundalini yoga and Hatha yoga. These were the three legs of Kashmir. That's why it was called sort of a Shaivism, essentially a trinity. The most, the Shaivism spread from Kashmir to particularly Orissa and Maharashtra. And then came Adi Shankaracharya to Kashmir back in 1000 something. And he spent almost a year in Kashmir and studying the scriptures and also got into discussions with the intellectuals at that time. And it started from his time. So things were going on smoothly till almost 1300, 1300s, let's say. At that time, the Kashmir was ruled by Ramachandra, and after he died, his daughter took over, Kota Rani. And also about the same time, there were some Persians who had come to Kashmir, and one of them was Mir Shah Hamdan or something like. They have built a monument in his honor. So when he came, he he wanted to spread Islam Kashmir, and he realized that Kota Rani and this whole clan is going to be a stumbling block. So unless we remove them out of the picture, Islam would spread in Kashmir. And what he did through intrigue and others, he got her killed. Then there was another gentleman from Tibet along with him who also got converted to Islam, and they conquered pretty much. In I think the date was 1339, I believe, when this this the this Iranian took over Kashmir from Kota Rani. And Kota Rani, he wanted to make her his concubine, but before that could happen, she committed harikari and killed herself. But in 1339, now Islam came to Kashmir, and it started spreading initially through persuasion, through some incentives, and there was some violence, but it was not at a mass scale. So this new king was Shah Mir. He was the dude, and then there were several different dynasties of Muslim. But the one that really we need to mention is the role of uh, Sikandar Butshikan. Sikandar Butshikan was probably the most destructive Islamic ruler in Kashmir. And which year was he? 1390 to 1400, 1500. But he was the most destructive individual as far as Kashmiri Pandits or Kashmiri Hindus were concerned. What does Butshikan mean? Butshikan mean, that's what I want to come to. His name was Sikandar, and he destroyed Kashmiri religious places. He massacred Kashmiris, and there were two interesting aspects to his. One was uh, he forcefully converted most Kashmiri Hindus to Islam, and those who didn't, they were captured and they were slaughtered on Saturday. Saturday in Kashmir is called Batawar. Bata means Kashmiri Pandit. Kashmiri Pandits, Kashmiri Hindus are referred to as Batas. They must be Hindu, yeah. And they used to call them Batuwa. On Batuwar, on Saturday, Batas would be killed at a place called Batamarun. But again, same thing, Hindu is to be killed there. That place is now called Batamalyun in Kashmir. It still exists in Kashmir, by the way. And they slaughtered a lot of Kashmiri Pandits who would not convert. So it's some place that exists today. It's like, yes, but Malul exists in Kashmir right now. It's like a pub and square of sorts. Yeah, it's the name of a particular locality. Like you have in the Moza Nagar, you have Rajbar, like that. You had this place called Batamaru, and literally in Kashmiri translates to the place where the bhats are to Maru meets Kile, Marna, and Batar is Kashmiri, where they were to be killed on Saturday, which was given the name Batamaru, Batawar. Batawar, they would be killing at Batamalu, Kashmiri Pandits, and that was under this Butshika. One of the most destructive things he did, he destroyed a sun temple at Martand. This sun temple was so unique. They had made these slots in the temple, and from the angle of the light and the sun, wherever it would come, they could tell the month, and they would also tell you the time. Those days, time was not 12 hours, it was a cycle of 6 hours. And they would tell you a gadi in that cycle. So this temple he destroyed, and he couldn't destroy it because it was made out of rock. So what he did, he collected the forests, the wood from all the forests there, and brought them around because somebody told him that this is made out of limestone. If you heat it to a very high temperature, it will crumble. And that's what they did. So they destroyed enough of it, but they still couldn't completely destroy. It has become an archaeological site in Kashmir, in Martand, and you could still see the remnants of it. It was a unique temple of its kind. A similar temple was built in Orissa, by the way. The Konark. Exactly. And now this I cannot verify, but Kashmiri Pandits claim that the actual design and everything came from Kashmir.
That's very interesting. Now, this Martand Sun Temple, is it in Indian Kashmir?
It's in Indian Kashmir. It's in a place called Martand, and the ruins are still there.
Okay.
I mean, this Butshikan really, really damaged the temple as much as he could. So then we come to Chok dynasty, which was relatively moderate, but no, the process of conversion was going on.
Right.
It was necessary, and finally Mughals came. Akbar conquered Kashmir, I believe, in 1585-86, and they ruled Kashmir till 1752. It was relatively peaceful, other than most famines that would happen, excepting Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb's time, there was again uh, forced conversions, and it then came the Afghans. Now you can imagine how brutal the Afghan rule must have been. Look at Afghanistan now.
Yeah.
Look what they're doing to their own country. Think of it, what they would do to a country, state like Kashmir and from other countries.
Yeah.
And Kashmir was really, really tortured during Afghan rule.
At that time, had most of the conversions already taken place?
Kashmir was almost 60-70% converted
At that time.
we see that the number is coming up from Rajatarangini, and th- there is no independent way to verify it. There are some English people have written about Kashmir, and they have talked about this Afghan rule, how brutal it was.
Yeah.
They don't really talk about how many people were there, but it was already a Muslim majority area.
So in a way, although the Afghan rule, I think the Ranis were the Ranjis, you were told, although they were brutal to Kashmiris, I think they were brutal to both Hindus and Muslims, or were they selective?
They were selected. And those Muslims who accepted them, who paid their taxes and all that, there was nothing done. But Kashmiri Pandits were hounded. They were hounded. And so now we are to the period of when Sikh, the Maharaja Ranjit Singh, has defeated Afghanistan, and in the process, he acquired Kashmir too. So the Sikh rule came to Kashmir. And then Kashmir became relatively peaceful. But by that time, Kashmir's population was almost 90% Muslims.
Okay.
It was now basically a Muslim area with the pockets of these 10% Kashmiri Pandits. And Ranjit Singh's period, since Ranjit Singh had several Kashmiri Pandits in his own courtyard, so he knew about the community. And also Guru Tegh Bahadur's sacrifice for Kashmiri Pandits he also knew about that. So Kashmiri Pandits got a peaceful period during that time. Then Sikhs rules the British, and British acquired Jammu and Kashmir. But they immediately sold it back to the Dogras, and Maharaja Gulab Singh became the first Dogra king. And again, now peace prevailed in the valley. See, Dogra rule was not discriminatory or even brutal to Kashmiri Muslims. And so Kashmiri Muslims were allowed to live the way they were, but Kashmiri Pandits started seeing some prosperity. They became landowners. They became owners of both paddy land, as that was called Adi Zameen, and they also became owners of orchards. That continued for a while, and uh, then we come to 1946, 1947.
So before you go to 1946 and 47, which year was when the Dogra Rule actually started after the
Dogra rule actually started in 1846 and ended up till 1947 till India got independent. And during that period, Kashmiri Hindus saw a lot of prosperity.
Okay.
And they were all the functionaries of the government were Kashmiri Pandits, not because they were Kashmiri Pandits, but because they were educated class.
Right.
They became good revenue officers.
Right.
So much so that even during Afghan rule, a Kashmiri Pandit was taken to Kabul to help train people there how to calculate taxes in a fair manner.
That is an incredibly interesting story. Like, on one hand, you have the Afghanis coming and attacking the Kashmiri and being very brutal about it. But then they're also taking Kashmiri Pandits back to Afghanistan to be able to help actually run the country.
Well, one of the Afghan rules, he wanted to educate his son. So they asked him, let's get this mullah. And he didn't want to deal with mullah. He said, I have seen enough of mullahs. I don't need to see them. I want him to learn math. I want him to learn philosophy. I want him to learn skills that will be useful to him in ruling. They said, well, there are these Kashmiri Pandits. I mean, you could probably have. So his teacher was Kashmiri Pandit. And he taught him. And this kid respected this. Now, this story has come to me from a grandfather. I have not read it anywhere, so I don't know whether I can verify it or not. But my grandfather was a headmaster of a high school, so he wouldn't make up stuff.
So it's more a tribal knowledge, something that has not usually been disseminated.
Yeah, how to calculate areas,
Yes.
how to calculate his revenue, and how to tax him. And he was so impressed that he was sent to Kabul because he wanted to show him off as this is he's he's a learned guy. He will teach us how to do this in our country, how to run a country, how to run our country.
But it's something very interesting here. From being a minority in their own land and being so brutally persecuted, how did Kashmiri Pandits over literally hundreds of years maintain their and continuous culture of education and learning? How did they do it?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Now, one of the things we all need to bear in mind that all the Islamic rulers were not brutal. Some of them saw the merit in using this. Sponsor, there was a King Zain-ul-Abedin. He developed some kind of a gangrene on his foot. And before that, Kashmiri Pandits were prosecuted. And so was he. But then somebody told him, hey, there was no cure for him for this. But somebody told him, hey, there's a Kashmiri Pandit guy, Arya Bhatt. Why don't you get him? He said, go and capture him. Kashmiri Pandits were hiding in the jungles, and since they had lived in Kashmir so long, and there was a local community, they were called Karkotas, and they helped Kashmiri Pandits to how to hide in jungles and all that. So this poor guy was captured. He was brought before the king, and king told him, can you cure this? He said, I don't know whether I can, but I will try. So he used a concoction, some portion of salajit or something, and applied it on it, and it seems to have cured him. And then afterwards he asked him, what can I do? How can I return this favor? What can I do for you? What would you like, a jagir and all that? He said, Jahapana, I don't need jagir. Can you let us Kashmiri Pandits come back to our towns and practice our religion? And he did that. So there were these moments of time where Kashmiri Pandits would hide and then come back. But as time by, they got more and more people got converted. It was convenient. It was more, more tactical to become a convert. So as I said, by the time Dogra rule established itself, Kashmir was already, not even Dogra, Sikh rule in 1820s or so. By that time, Kashmir was already 90% Muslim.
So speaking about the Dogra rule, how was that rule in general for the Kashmiris?
Very good. They did not discriminate against Muslims like Afghanis had done against Hindus, or like this Chak dynasty, even the Aurangzebs of the world. It was not what they didn't do. They didn't show any favoritism towards Muslims, but they did show favoritism to Kashmiri Pandits. Okay, so there was a favoritism. There was some favoritism, and mainly because Kashmiri Pandits were very educated. It's a tradition in our family, in our culture. We were always taught it at home. We would have a family Purohit who would come in, and he would recite the scriptures and math and other things. Even if we were in jungles, these traditions were followed. So Kashmiri Pandits did get favorable treatment. But at the same time, to say that they didn't deserve it, a lot of them did deserve it. Understood. And then we come to 1929, 30s. At that time, there's a young man from Kashmir, Kashmiri Muslim. He had gone to Aligarh to study, and he studied chemistry there. His name was Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah. And he came back to Kashmir and he joined politics, and he made a political party called Muslim Conference. And this was uh, a party for the Muslims. It was not Muslim League, but it was along the similar lines that Kashmir has separate identity. It cannot be, if India has freedom, it cannot be part of a Hindu country. That was the original. But anyway, Kashmir independence happens, 1947, 15th August, Kashmir is free. And it's ruled by a Dogra king, Maharaja Hari Singh. At that time, as most of us Kashmiri Pandits about all different states in India were given option either to join Pakistan or join India. Hyderabad tried it and Junagadh tried it. And Kashmir was kind of one of those states which was kept in limbo. It wanted to be an independent country, and Maharaja Hari Singh was leaning in that direction.
So at that time, the leaning in the direction of having Kashmir as an independent country, was it a desire only of Maharaja, or do you think that was also the desire of the people on the street?
Maharaja Hari Singh wanted a separate independent country like Nepal. But Sheikh saw also in it an opportunity. He saw that we are 90%, the population is 90% Muslims. Eventually, they will have to, I will be the ruling this out. And he wanted to be some kind of an emir or a sheikh, basically a king with a Muslim title. That was his vision of Kashmir. And there were two important things that happened during that time. First, the Jinnah somehow managed to upset the entire top leadership of Muslim League. He essentially dismissed them. He said Muslims have one leader and that's myself. Who the hell are these guys? And Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah saw himself as a leader of Kashmiri Muslims, which he was. Right. They literally loved him. And he would get out, he would have a strike, and strike would happen. And also, he was astute enough not to break communication lines with India, with Indian leaders. Nehru knew him personally. And Nehru, whenever he would come to Delhi, he would make it a point to meet Nehru. So much so, Nehru defended him. When he was imprisoned by Maharaja Hari Singh, Nehru was the one who defended him in a court of law. So his friendship with Nehru, and second, Jinnah having, really turned him off. So Kashmir was headed towards an independent country. And India was not completely on board, but they accepted it. Hey, it is what it is. Let's deal with it. And Jinnah was furious at all this, that how dare they do this? He's not supporting us. So what he did, they amassed a army of irregulars, mostly Pashtuns and Pathans, to go and invade Kashmir and loot whatever you can. But once you're done with it, hand it over to Pakistani army.
So loot the cities, loot the people, but give us the land.
Give us the land. Give us this state.
Yeah.
Once you're done with it, you can keep the loot.
Hmm.
That was the general message to all of them.
Hmm.
So in 1947, and started these. They were called Kabalis. Kabalis is a bastardized word of Kabuls. So essentially, these were Pathans who came in.
Yeah.
And these Kabalis murder a lot of people. In fact, my wife's uncle was killed, beheaded. So in Banwas, mass slaughter of 6 happened. They used to call them Balwala Kafir. They would actually look selectively for this Balwala Kafir because 6 are a martial race. Right? That's how they were trained to defend the Dharma. And they were slaughtered in my real worst garbage. But now Hari Singh sees all this, and he is really running scared. He realizes that he has no future there.
But at that time, so the Kashmir that we're talking about, it basically comprised all the 5 regions, I would say: Jammu, Ladakh, Kashmir, Gilgit, Baltistan.
It involves, and initially it was just the Kashmir Valley. The attack was on the Kashmir Valley. They felt that if Kashmir Valley is secure, then Gilgit, Baltistan, Askardu, and all that, Ladakh will all fall in place. And it was also believed that Jammu they may not be able to keep hold because Jammu was always a Hindu majority. There are a lot of Muslims there too, but they chose to go to Sialkot. And but Kashmir, this was the way for them to get Kashmir, kill the king. And king at that time, Hari Singh, he made desperate calls to Delhi. I need help. I need your help. I'm being told, please help me when I need it. And India's condition was laid at that time by Vallabhbhai Patel. He said, if an Indian army soldier is going to sacrifice and spill his blood, then tell this king he has to accede to us. We're not going to we're not going to visit blood, we're not going to shed blood for some king. We're not going to do that. And Maharaja Hari Singh was so desperate, he said he's ready to sign an accession. So he acceded formally with a document to Kashmir, to India. And this was countersigned by Lord Martand, who was at that time the governor of Jaipur. And Indian army landed. They kicked these Kabalis. They killed lots of them. They ran away, literally ran away. Some of them barefooted back to present day. But here's where Nehru, some historians think it was a big mistake, and I don't know what was the right thing. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know the situation. But Nehru was advised by Mountbatten to take this dispute to United Nations. And he drew a line on paper on this. He said that we don't need to cross this. And Kashmir, India ended up with about, I would say, 50 to 60% of the land, and the rest was on the other side of the border. And it got taken to United Nations. And United Nations passed a resolution that Kashmir, the will of the people will decide where they want to go. And for that, there was a condition laid that all the armies will go back to their respective countries so that a UN supervised plebiscite can be conducted in both India occupied Kashmir and Pakistan occupied Kashmir. When the question of getting the soldiers out, Pakistan basically said, no, we're not getting out. And India said, well, if you're not going to go, we're not going to go either. So the step-back continued.
I think in the United Nations resolution, there was another condition that Pakistan withdraws first, and then India maintains a minimum possible force that is required to maintain law and order and security, and then we do the plebiscite.
Yes, what was said was that because what India said, that was India. India insisted on that. It said that, look, Pakistan is the one who invaded, so there's no guarantee they won't come again. Right? We are okay with conducting a plebiscite, but Pakistan will have to vacate its army. United Nations will be there, and we will maintain a very small uh, contingent just to help the United Nations to conduct the plebiscite. And but Pakistan will have to withdraw. We cannot trust them. They are the ones who created the problem in the first place. As aggressors, yeah. As an aggressors. And United Nations, there is your resolution of that. Right. To which Pakistan is a signatory, to which India is a signatory.
So before India took this issue to the United Nations, militarily, were we in a position, because when the Qabilis were running back, were we in a position to take the rest of the Kashmir?
Well, see, I can give you different opinions on this. Which opinion matters, I don't know. One opinion was that India should have crossed the ceasefire line and they should have taken over the so-called Azad Kashmir, basically Muzaffarabad, and take over Gilgit and Baltistan. In Gilgit, there was a contingent of the British Indian Army, and it was headed by a Hindu colonel, and he was killed by his subjects who were mostly Muslims. So Gilgit had, it was in that fluid situation. And if Indian army had crossed, Pakistan had threatened that there will be a war between India and Pakistan. Now, some say that, so what? There's already a war between India and Pakistan. Yeah. Who are we trying to kill each other here? Right. Let's go and finish it. We should cross this ceasefire line, take over Kashmir, and take over Gilgit and Baltistan. That was one opinion. The other opinion was that morally, India has no right on Kashmir because the division of India was based on Muslim majorities going to Pakistan and Hindu majorities staying with India. But then you have the other argument here too, that there are almost 200 million Muslims in India now. If they could live peacefully with India, why can't these 4 or 5 million Kashmiri Muslims not live? So therefore, as I said, it is not a lot of opinions on this. I don't know what was the right path here.
I think, how would it be? This is not exactly only a religious or a military dilemma. It's also a bit of a moral dilemma. Then this dilemma basically also strikes at the heart of what was the basis of division. Pakistan got created as a homeland for the Muslims, but India did not have any such designation, which means, in theory, a Hindu state should not have gone to Pakistan because Pakistan was for Muslims, but a Muslim state could have come to India because if India was a secular nation, welcoming everyone. But I think there's always this hypothetical that would dangle over our heads that whether we had a military capability at that time to go into the gate.
But here's a capability I can answer that because that's kind of an objective analysis and that has nothing to do with opinions. India could have gotten there. It would have resulted in a war between Pakistan and India. And India would have prevailed for the very simple reason that India had a lot bigger army than Pakistan ever could muster. And India could not only have threatened them by their infantry, they could have also threatened them with their air force. India still had some planes left from the British India. The argument that is presented here is that, well, they were British generals managing the Pakistan army. They would have created mutiny. What mutiny? What are they going to do? Well, he still has to be fought by the local native Indians, right? Whether they are from Pakistan, a part of India, or they are from India. India had a much bigger army. India could have easily walked in to present-day Muzaffarabad, taken over Muzaffarabad, and further cut off Gilgit Baltistan. That was one of the biggest mistakes India made. And unfortunately for India, we didn't have a visionary uh, crop of leaders at that time.
I think a lot of blame usually comes on Nehru's shoulders in a lot of these situations. And I think I would probably fall into that camp a little bit, but I do understand that immediately after independence, probably Nehru and a lot of other decisions that he has took as well, including the decision of, the punch, even things like that, trying to do with China. He was in Pisa, and he thought that maybe somehow by doing things in a halfway house approach, let me not have a full bloody fight. Let me just take some of the land that belongs to me and give up some land. For example, I think one of the things I read was also that the Indus Water Treaty was also an appeasement move by Nehru to say, look, if you want Kashmir only to secure your water supply, I'm going to give you that water supply assurance by the Indus Water Treaty for the next 60 years. And if that reassures you, I think you would not have this burning desire to occupy Kashmir, and we can still live happily. So I think maybe in his mind, he was an appeaser, maybe he was a negotiator. Clearly not exactly this.
I don't see in that way.
Okay.
Nehru's whole, when you follow his actions, the steps he took, one thing comes loud and clear. He wants to be a world-class statesman. He wants the world to recognize him as a statesman for India. And in his pursuit, he did not do things that were in the interests of India, that were more in the interest of his personal glory. For instance, see, Kashmir, entire Kashmir could have taken more. All he had to do was he had to fly to Soviet Union, and Stalin had agreed. He had said it so many speeches, how they view that whole area. They would have threatened England. If they interfere in this, we are going to come down. And I guarantee you, after Second World War, England was almost bankrupt. They would never dare to do anything there. And India could have captured this entire area. But it was Nehru's personal image that was important to him. This personal glorification can be traced to Gandhi directly.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say this. I respect Gandhiji a lot, but I also see his airheaded decisions. I mean, division is of India is made on the basis of religion. Accept it and deal with it. And deal with it the way Ambedkar suggested you. Either you accept it or you don't accept it. Or you don't accept, right? Don't have this khichdi. It's not going to work. And Ambedkar was very blunt on this. Ambedkar said that Muslims in India are always going to be a problem for India.
I think to the credit of Ambedkar, not only he was a visionary, he was going right. We have also a pretty blunt one. I've heard.
Very, very blunt one. And he said, sister. Now, whether you agree with that or not, I don't know. I probably don't agree with that, that, the Muslims will be a problem in India. They do. There will be some problem areas. It's a question of how we manage. Exactly. We have 200 million. We can't wish them away. Hindus and Muslims have to work out this equation in such a way they learn to live each other. Now, having said that, there are things in Islam that prohibits them for cooperating with non-Muslims. They don't see non-Muslims as equals. Non-Muslims, they should not make even friends with non-Muslims. However, times are going to change. Saudi Arabia has changed. Can you believe what happened in the last 5 years in Saudi Arabia? I can't believe it.
I'm hoping some of that positive influence of the changes in Saudi Arabia basically gets percolated to the different parts of the world as well. Because a lot of Muslim countries do see Saudi Arabia as the figurehead of Islam, where a lot of ideology flows from. So I think that's definitely a hopeful sign.
Well, the I don't know how far it is true. I just read it on the social media that Modi ji, when he met King MBS, he basically told him, he said that uh, this came from actually a very senior leader of BJP.
Hmm.
He told his small group of people, and I knew one of those people, and he told me this. He told them that you guys need to reform Islam. if you want to be compatible with the rest of the world. Days of conquest are gone. You're not going to be spreading Islam everywhere. You have problems in Europe and you have problems in wherever there is interface with the non-Muslims. So MBS, it seems, he was not, his reaction from, they said that, but he listened to it very carefully and very calmly and shook hands with her. And the, you know, the, we don't know the rest of the reaction. So therefore, bottom line is this. India has over 200 billion Muslims. They are scattered all over India. They have as much right to live in India as now we have. There is no point in some group of people wishing that we had all that. No. And Muslims also have a duty on their part to kind of moderate their teachings. And the responsibility falls on the leaders of Islam, particularly MBS and others.
Makes sense. So coming back to the topic of Kashmir now, with all the Kabilis attack and India's response and the signing of the accession, the instrument of accession.
It's a legal document. See, people should never forget that. It's a legal document where Maharaja, the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir at that time, acceded to India, and that was sealed with Lord Mountbatten, and it was accepted by the United Nations.
So if it was accepted by the United Nations, why did United Nations even talk about the fact that there has to be a plebiscite?
That was where India's lack of shrewd leadership comes in. We didn't have shrewd who saw what shrewd means what? You basically forecast future. You take different scenarios. What are the possible outcomes of this action?
Right.
And then you analyze each one in terms of only one factor. What is in the best interest of India?
Yeah.
And they never did that. That was never done. This was a done deal. There was no need to take it on. Even though Mountbatten was the person who advised Nehru, and Nehru was overimpressed with Mountbatten. He listened to everything he would say, and that is where the situation is. But continuing on this history, so Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah is made the chief minister, and in my opinion, Maharaja Hari Singh was treated very shabbily because Nehru had a personal grudge against him because he got a Nehru.
I have heard him in and I think that was in 1946.
1940, yeah, 46, 45, 46, somewhere around that time. I don't remember the exact time. And he didn't like him, so the poor guy was in Bombay, but he was able to manage to get Karan Singh, his son, as the first Sadr-e Riyasat. And they were given this Article 370 that they would maintain a separate identity. The only thing that Government of India would control would be their currency, their foreign affairs, and their defense. The rest, everything would be in the hands of Kashmiris themselves.
So in theory, they could have their own currency?
No, not the currency. Okay, of course not. But everything does. They could not have the foreign ministry, foreign relations would be with India, and this. And this is documented again. This is not something verbally shook hands on. Right? They were very well outlined, 370. But then Sheikh Ubla reneged on it. Sheikh Ubla didn't see himself as the prime minister. He didn't think that was enough for him. He felt that he should become an emir or a king or a something. And he started hobnobbing with the West. And he came to, he had come to the West. He met several leaders in England and also in US.
And this was after he had been made,
after he was the prime minister. Because now he was dreaming of a separate country altogether for Kashmir. And he was going to basically include in that Baltistan and others and all that. And he started making statements to that effect. That now we don't need India, we know what to do, we have... And when he landed back at the Palam airport, which is now Indira Gandhi International, he was arrested. And he had created conditions where all his second rank leadership was already talking about that, oh, we have no friends in US, but they all want to. There was one person, though, who did not go along with it, was Bakshi Muhammad. So when Shaipullah landed, he was arrested for treason because you agreed with us. We signed a document, and then you go and hobnob with the leaders and basically started to pay your false reconciliations and started saying that we should be an independent Kashmir. And that's not acceptable to us. And they made Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad as the chief minister. During Bakshi Ghulam Ahmad's, he was a very corrupt leader, extremely corrupt Kashmiri Muslim. And one more thing, we need to talk about land reforms. In 1951, well, even before that, when Kashmir became, it was part of India, most of the land was owned by landowners, and several of them were Kashmiri Pandits too. In fact, almost majority of them were Kashmiri Pandits. They owned both the wetlands, which is paddy, where they were growing rice, and the orchards. So Sheikhullah basically carried out land reforms, which they meant that all the land from non-tillers should be given back to the tillers, which was a revolutionary step of its time. You can argue in favor of it, you can argue against it. But bottom line is that Kashmiri Pandits lost all their lands. It was given back to the tillers, and they became the rightful owners of the land. Now, back to now.
So that could have meant that Kashmiri Pandits at the time in 51 lost oversized influence and property, and
That had started after 1948. Okay, after Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah became the prime minister, that started already.
Okay.
That had already started. And the Kashmiri Pandits were weeded out, and the main profession for Kashmiri Pandits was teaching. We became teachers or work for the state because we knew English and we knew, they were most of, 99% of Kashmiri Pandits are educated. And non-educated who can sign their name, educated as individuals, as degreed individuals who can speak in different languages. And whatever the prosperity was left, that got abolished in 1952. They were given a grace period during which they could get some produce from their land, but eventually, after some years, it had to be given to a tour. So Kashmiri Pandits had lost all the influence at that time, but they were respected because we were teaching kids, we were teachers, we were in the government jobs, and this continued both under the Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad. But by that time, after the War of 65, India realized that they need to get the people on board in Kashmir. Even though Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad kept lid on on the situation, but really there was simmering anger at the lower level. If it could be exploited by Pakistan.
But what was anger against?
Anger was, there was always an Islamic element in Kashmir. And they were telling them that Kashmir should rightfully be an Islamic republic. We should have Islamic Sharia here. And we can achieve that either being part of Pakistan or being as an independent Muslim country. Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad kept the lid of it. He managed it. But all the political, analysts in India realized that, hey, there is some simmering thing going on underneath. We don't see it, but we just see on the surface calm, but it's not. We need to make up with their leaders. We need to find their leaders. And they opened dialogue with Sheikhullah, who was kept in a prison, but not, we're not talking about a third-degree prison. This prison was not a prison. It was a beautiful house in Kud. And he had servants and all that. He was being fed, but he was not allowed to go out and speak to public. And During that time, something interesting, by the way, happened. His son, current Farooq, he became spokesman for Pakistan's position on Kashmir. One of the most blistering attacks on India's policy in Kashmir was by Farooq Abdullah at the United Nations. And this is record, you can just verify it. So he went to the United Nations. She was in England. Yeah, and his wife is from England. And he was in England, and the Pakistan roped him in to basically present their case at the United Nations, and he did that.
So kind of a policy that Sheikh Abdullah started, which is like talking to India on one side and talking to Kashmir, Pakistan on another side. His son kind of took the same kind of position, kind of going more towards Pakistan.
Yeah, he's openly for Pakistan.
Okay.
He said that people want Pakistan. What are we doing there? Why is a blistering attack?
Hmm.
I think you can get a text of that on it. Somebody has put it on the on one of the social media. And with all this, India's policy always has diffused the situation. See what you can do. Make some compromises here. Define your no-nos. Yep. And define your maybes, and see how much of this maybe you can negotiate.
Right.
And that's really what happened here. The Sheikhullah, they opened channels with him. And at that time, Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad was also becoming a little cocky. And he was put in his place by this Kamraj Plata, which, and I don't know whether you're familiar with Kamraj Plata.
No, I'm not. I'm familiar with Kamraj, but Kamraj was the Khan Vice Yes.
He came up with a plan, which I think was the plan of some of the young leaders in Congress. And the plan was all the senior leaders should resign and they should off. Some of them they approved, but they took. So it was said that no resignation will be accepted. They are so well. But there's a praise of it. Indira Gandhi being such a short woman, she had accepted. So suddenly, but she blew up and is out of job. This was one way to kind of change the politics in Kashmir and bring in someone who is not viewed by Farooq Abdullah as basically a traitor. And that's how they viewed Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad as. They brought him another gentleman, Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq. And he was not an Islamist, neither was Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad for that matter. But he was a little more intellectually oriented, and his task was open up door communication channels with Sheikhullah. And they did open Sheikhullah. You see, people also don't realize that Indira Gandhi was very close to Sheikhullah. It was like a fatherly figure to her. And he would always refer to her as his daughter. And she found that she could use that personal equation with him and kind of get some peace there and shut Pakistan's mouth. Because Pakistan was going gung-ho on this propaganda, especially, after 1965. And then there was one incident that changed this entire thing. And that was 1971. When these brave, proud soldiers of Pakistan, 93,000 of them, surrendered before an army of so-called infidels. And the guy who negotiated the terms of surrender was none other than Major General Jacobs, who retired as Lieutenant General Jacobs. He was of Jewish faith.
Yes.
He was the one who was told to negotiate. That changed the entire mindset. Because for the first time, Kashmiris realized that Kashmiri Muslims particularly, Pakistan is in no position to fight a war with India.
They cannot even, they depend on themselves. They couldn't defend themselves. How would they were resolved?
And there was silence, complete silence in Kashmir when that surrender happened. And it also changed the mind of Farooq Abdullah. He said he has two choices. I'm putting now I wrote this not written, but this is me thinking as an individual. I put myself in his shoes. Okay, here I am getting old. I've been in the big house, in this rest house of the Wonder of India for the last 15 years. I'm not going anywhere. He was arrested in 1503. By 70, it's almost 70, 80. He's not getting young. He doesn't want to die in a prison. So he and this 1971 convinced him that Pakistan is in no position to help him.
Yeah.
I need to make peace with India. And that thing started the dialogue, and an accord was signed between Indira Gandhi and him. That basically told him that you'll be chief minister, you're not going to be Sadr Riyasat, you're not going to be a king, you'll have to go for people to win their confidence, and you can start a political party. And his original party, Muslim Conference, whose name was changed in 48 or so to National Conference, they they would fight elections, and India would honor you as any other chief minister. And he accepted that.
So it looks to me that looking at Sheikh Abdullah, right, whether you can blame him for being a populist and doing the reforms to be able to help his community, or whether you would basically blame it on the demographics that were in Kashmir. But it looks like that all along he was the most popular leader in Kashmir.
He was the most popular leader starting from 1930s. He had a vision for Kashmir. And got to give him credit for one thing. Even though he was a staunch Muslim, but he did not believe in that Hindus are Kashmiri Pandits are Kafirs. And he didn't discriminate in that brazen manner. And he was acceptable to Kashmiri Pandits too. But as a leader, Kashmiri Muslims looked up to him. They gave him a title, Sher-e-Kashmir. Sher means lion of Kashmir. He's the lion of Kashmir.
And by his own heritage, his grandfather was a Hindu.
His grandfather was a Kaur. He was a Kashmiri Pandit. And in fact, here's an interesting thing you brought. My great, great, great grandfather was his cousin. See, my grandfather was Karkol Moza. His father was Lalakol Moza. His father was Gopal Moza. His father was Krishan Moza. And his father was some Kaur. And he was related to the Sheikh Ublah's grandfather. Well, you actually share some. Well, we're talking about third cousin. Maybe I'm his 10th cousin, something like this. So we're talking about, but the point is that Sheikh Ublah was very popular. Kashmiri Muslims looked up to him.
Yeah.
And India felt that this is the time to make a deal with him, and the accord was signed between him and Indira Gandhi, by which she would become the chief minister.
So I think if I could summarize that entire almost a 20-year between 1948 and maybe by the time Sheikh Abdullah died, which was I think 72 or something.
No, he died
82. I think it looks like that there was a distrust between India and Sheikh Abdullah, and part of that was fueled by Sheikh Abdullah's ambitions of not being a chief minister of an Indian state, but trying to explore different options in which he could play India against Pakistan, Pakistan against India, to be able to be the Sadr Riyasat, or like some sort of
be end of state. He wanted to be in the Kashmir to be like Nepal. But his problem was that India didn't accept it and Pakistan did.
And I feel this is something that we can come back and discuss. So where do we go from here? But I think an independent Kashmir is almost impossible.
It goes impossible
Because not only Pakistan is out there to eat it, but also China.
Right. So from that, you have three powers there. You have China, you have India, and you have Pakistan. And now those who constantly keep you in turmoil.
And given the fact how Afghanistan is fighting with Pakistan, you could not even rule out Afghanistan as a potential
stakeholder in some parts of Kashmir. Absolutely. So, and therefore, the independence was a dream of Sheikh Ublah, which he saw is not going to happen. He gave up on it.
Yeah.
And that brings us finally to this accord. And then Sheikh Ublah dies in 82, and he hands over his reign to his son, Farooq Ublah.
Before you go there, I think we talked about the fact that India has lacked some of those visionary leaders, right? In many cases, I think even the Indian victories against Pakistan in 65 and 71, we had a chance to settle the issue once and for all. I think we still falter in defiance.
I told to say Indira Gandhi, I'll respect her a lot, but what India had won on the field, she just gave it away. And in her defense, though, she states that her objective was to break up Pakistan. Once she achieved that, everything else was secondary.
I think that was a fair ask. I just think that, and I've kind of read a lot of notes and commentaries on some of that negotiation, especially that happens with the Shimla Accord. I think Indira Gandhi was so confident that when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto comes on to do the negotiating table, the first thing he would want is the 93,000 soldiers back. So she thought that she had a pretty big negotiating uh, thing to talk to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto about. But the moment she said, "Hey, we've got your 93,000 soldiers, what are you going to give us in return?" He said, I don't care. You can keep those 93,000 soldiers. They were anyway the guys who got defeated in the battlefield. We don't want them back." And the moment Zulfikar Ali Bhutto said that, Indira Gandhi had no negotiating power left.
Well, the villagers contributed to her, agreed. And then there's a case made by apologists of Indira Gandhi that it would have cost humongous amount of money. India has an army of 2 million people. We're not counting the irregulars and others who have 93,000. That's just about 3 divisions of army. Exactly. You can't beat them. And what you do here is that you will create a problem for Pakistan in its own country. So I said India was not fortunate enough to have some of these shrewd leaders. We were ruled by these airheads who had no clue in the real politics.
Yeah.
They were living in their own world. And it goes to the due apologies to Gandhi itself. They had no clue how to run a country, what it means to make a successful country. Nehru is attributed, and I was witness to that too. He had said a couple of times, "We don't need an army."
Oh, I remember that. That was, and the Panchsheel and all the.
He never understood what China's goal was. Americanized America. See, people don't realize this in India. Nehru comes to meet Truman, and Truman was a very down-to-earth president. Came from a farmland, had been farmed, and he saw India's first biggest problem was to feed itself. And he realized countries are going to blackmail this country when they are faced with famine. They don't have enough food to grow. They're not growing enough food to feed their hungry population. Right. So he was talking to about this, that you need to grow agriculture, you need to go. Guess what Nehru is talking to him about? He's talking about philosophy of Haral Lasky. Of Haral Lasky. Here's a president who is pleasantly this, and all he has to do it. He has to tell him that China has its eyes on Tibet. We don't want Tibet to go there. Somehow British managed to keep it from the Chinese. They had kept several divisions of British Indian Army there to prevent it. We need your help to keep Tibet as a buffer state between them and us. Free. That should have been his objective. I was in issues, but I wasn't in issues.
I think in his defense, to be honest, now even if you can call Nehru an intellectual, and I think there is going to be a question on whether you can call him an intellectual or not. But I don't think intellectuals always make good politicians. So I think you need to have someone who has a blend of military capabilities, a strategic mind, vision, and intellectual to make a good politician. I think Nehru, a lot of his actions did fall short of some of the things that we needed. And by the way, to also make a reasonable point, I think we're suffering for some of those.
That of course we're paying for it. Let me give you an example. When Mao Zedong was negotiating with Chiang Kai-shek, he had clear idea. exactly what we are about to do.
Yeah.
And in this, his views were not formulated by him. They were formulated with a group of people which included most of his military generals, including Jute and Chauhan and others. And India, on the other hand, Nehru never consulted. Why do we have this chicken's neck? Why did India have this chicken's neck, which is a small strip of land of 40 miles or 60 miles between Bangladesh and Nepal and India? Well, even in 1930, you should have consulted military leaders. Hey, this is feast. They said, no, we don't need to. We need to get that from Etzbalka. And it would have been gotten in 1947. English would have accepted it.
I would have said even if not 1947, in 1971, when the whole country was being drawn, I think could have been a reasonable thing for us to have.
As I said, we never didn't have. They would never consult military because, see, again, in fairness to Nehru and Indira Gandhi, they were so scared of the military becoming so powerful that they would repeat what happened in Pakistan. That is also true. They didn't want military to play that upper power. And I don't know what would have been that happy compromise, but India should have drawn its borders with input from the military generals. That didn't happen.
I think, if not military generals, at least military strategists to really understand what your vision should be. But I think I do agree with your point. Giving military an oversized say in politics is a very slippery slope. And you never know when it can lead into a situation that you've seen repeat over and over in Khargan, Pakistan.
It didn't happen in Chad. It didn't happen in Soviet Union. It didn't happen now. Soviet Union, Putin had warned Ukraine. If you try to join NATO and you bring NATO troops on your board, we are not going to let you survive. And he showed it. And eventually, the settlement is going to be Donetsk will be part of Russia, and they are going to get a guarantee from Ukraine and guaranteed by US that it's not going to join NATO. End of story.
I think there's also a rumor, for example, that the president usually lets CIA do their thing. So CIA is fairly independent in coming up with a lot of militaristic strategic maneuvers outside the boundaries of the United States. So
as I said, we don't know the events of 47 things where it's hard to get his minds and get into the mind of people.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can only judge them. We can only do that
hypothetical. Looking back,
we don't know their compulsions. We don't know their situation.
Like hindsight is always 20/20. Absolutely. So coming to the issue of Kashmir, and when Sheikh Abdullah, there was another accord between Indira Gandhi and Sheikh Abdullah, and Sheikh Abdullah eventually came back to Panwar after spending almost 20 years in house arrest, right?
So how did Kashmir move forward from there? Well, you see, it has always been a den of corruption. There was corruption rampant. That's at every stage, at every level. It's a very striking statement. It was corrupt at every level. Everybody was taking bribes. It was calm. Sheikhullah knew it. Where was the money having found? Well, Kashmir could have never survived by itself. It needed infusion of funds. They were coming from Goblet of India. And it's happening even now.
So in the last time, look, when you look at the entire Union of India, there are states that are surplus and there are states that are deficit. And the states that are deficit are funded by...
And Kashmir is at the top of that list.
So Kashmir has never turned profit, it's not Tamkani, but it has
They have never balanced their books. They can't.
And so the money flows in from the government.
In Persia has to constantly put money in it. So much so, rice. They can't grow enough rice to feed their population. They can't grow enough animal, chickens, cattle to feed their people. That's coming from India. They don't have enough tax base because most Kashmiris are not paying any taxes. However, from what I'm hearing now, that Modi is going to tighten screws on this. And they have already started the process. That Kashmir has to be self-sufficient. You have enough tourism there that you should be able to tax that tourist money and tourists. Can you believe year before last there were almost 25 million Indian tourists in Kashmir? India's Kashmir's population is less than 6 million.
And 25 million. So we believe for every single person there are four tourists.
Four tourists were there. Well, for the ODA. Yes, for ODA. They didn't come at once, but they came over a period of time. But they brought a lot of revenue to it.
Given all that has happened in Kashmir over the last several centuries, to be honest, but we have talked about it in a lot of detail. So where will we go from here? How does Kashmir return to normalcy?
Well, first of all, Kashmir has to become truly a secular state. Secular state, the prerequisite for this is that non-majority population should feel safe to be there. In this case, the majority is basically Kashmiri Muslims. In Mali, I'm talking about. Kashmir needs to have non-Muslims in the valley and create that culture of living with each other. Muslims in Kashmir have to accept non-Muslims as their neighbors, and then it will thrive. Then it will become truly a part of Indian Union. Otherwise, it will always stand like a sore thumb, and it will be exploited by particularly Pakistan and their fellow travelers in the valley, Islamists and others, to create trouble. The only way you're going to do it is strengthen the hands of secular forces in Kashmir. And to do that, you need to bring in more non-Muslims into Kashmir, settle them. There are a lot of non-Muslims working in Kashmir. They are working as labor. They are working as household help. They should be given accommodation to live in Kashmir.
With the removal of Article 370 now, there is a chance for anyone to go and live in Kashmir now, correct?
There's no legal hurdle now. There's no legal hurdle now. Before 370 was removed, you could not go to Kashmir and buy land. No. I could go because I was born there. I could trace my ancestry to that. But you could not. For that matter, anybody from Tamil Nadu, from Maharashtra, even though Kashmiri Muslims could go anywhere and buy anything they want, and they have. There are a lot of Kashmiri Muslims working in Kerala. There are a lot of Kashmiri Muslims in West Bengal. There are a lot of Kashmiri Muslims in UP, especially in Agra and in Aligarh area. There are a lot of Kashmiri Muslims in Delhi, properties. If they can buy properties, then you should let Indians who happen to be either Hindus or even Muslims or Christians or Jews or Sikhs, they should be able to go to Kashmir and buy property. And that is now happening. But for this to happen, Government of India has to take the initiative. They have to start identifying areas and start settling them. It cannot happen by itself. Maybe it will happen over 200-300 years, but I don't think India has that luxury.
Yeah.
With a hostile neighbor like Pakistan, with the help of China, being on your borders.
So, as you mentioned, the first thing that needs to happen is this integration, and people need to be creating a more of secular state. And I think the second thing, as you had mentioned before, was that the state needs to be a less corrupt state. You need to have less corruption so that more money can go towards development, where the people can start to see how their lives are changing, and they can actually look forward to an improved society rather than a society that is mired in violence and separatism, correct?
Absolutely. And there would be a certain element of corruption which is inherent part of human political setup. We are not going to change that. But this gross, I mean, you're talking about essentially whatever revenue you come, you just park at it and telling you, we didn't get anything, what can we do? We're sorry. That thing does to go.
Okay. Can Kashmir ever survive as an independence?
Independent of India?
Well, as an independent state, independent of India, Pakistan, China.
No, it cannot survive. Even Kashmiri Muslims know that. They know that they cannot survive. What's going to happen? They will be always manipulated by these three neighbors.
What is Pakistan's reason for continued insistence on Kashmir? Like they've had 75 years of wars. Nothing good has come out of that. Why does Pakistan continue to insist on Kashmir?
Pakistan has an institution called the Pakistan Army. Now let's assume for a second the peace has broken out. Pakistan has no claims on Kashmir. Pakistan has no war with India. It's basically open border. And if you don't think of average Pakistani, they'll start wondering, what the hell we got this army for? We buy this goddamn tank. It doesn't produce anything. We have to keep on spending money on it to maintain it and fuel it. What do we need this army for? Army knows that their whole justification in Pakistan is that there is an enemy there and they have to defend Pakistan against that enemy. And that enemy they have identified as India.
So Kashmir is only an excuse for Pakistan's army to create a bogeyman called India and to stay in existence and it's to stay proud. Okay.
They have, otherwise, there's no reason for a country like Pakistan, which is really background. But it is constantly asking for monetary help. It has no revenue stream to raise to get foreign exchange. And you think they can afford an army like this?
Well, Pakistan makes its own preferences and choices. I mean, it cannot give food to its people, but it really wants to spend on insurgency in other countries. That's probably Pakistan's priority. So
therefore, even if you create Pakistan, Kashmir as an independent country, I guarantee you Pakistan will immediately try to occupy it. That is the way they can justify their existence. So Kashmir as an independent country, even Kashmiri Muslims know that that's not on the cards. That's not going to work. They will be always being pulled on three directions by these. And eventually what's going to happen is that China will become the road.
Mr. Moza, this has been a very entertaining conversation. I do think that there are going to be additional issues that we need to talk about.
Yes, you need to talk about micromarriage. What happened to us, exodus, we didn't talk about it, but we'll do it. We will have to do it different.
Thank you so much for coming and gracing us with all the information that you shared with us.
Thank you for letting me come here. Thank you for taking this interview. And I look forward to another opportunity like this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.